My name is Linda, I am 40 years old, and for almost half of my life, I thought I had everything a woman could hope for. A stable marriage, a home, and above all, a son I adored more than anything else in this world. His name is Daniel, and from the moment I held him in my arms, I believed he was my greatest blessing. I raised him, loved him, sacrificed for him, and poured 18 years of my soul into being his mother. Never once did I question who he was. Never once did I imagine that the truth could be so cruel. The day of his high school graduation was supposed to be perfect. I remember how the sun blazed over the crowded courtyard, how the air was filled with cheers and music. Daniel looked so handsome in his cap and gown, taller than me now, his smile shining as if the whole world belonged to him. I clapped until my hands ached when they called his name. Tears blurred my eyes as I watched him walk across that stage. In that moment, I thought, this is it. This is why all the sacrifices were worth it. After the ceremony, we went out to celebrate. My husband, Michael, sat beside me, proud and glowing. We laughed, we ate, we toasted to Daniel's future. And then, as if it were nothing at all, Daniel leaned forward and said, "Mom, the university requires a full health check before enrollment. There's even a DNA test in the package. It's just a formality, but I'll need you and Dad to sign the papers." I smiled and nodded, thinking it was routine. How could I have known that tiny detail would destroy the foundation of our family? Weeks later, the envelope arrived. Michael opened it first, and I can still hear the silence that fell over the house when he read the results. His face drained of color, his hands shook, and then he looked at me as if I were a stranger. I reached for the paper, and my heart stopped when I saw the words. Biological relationship with the father, not established. Time froze. I felt my chest tighten until I could hardly breathe. The room spun, and the only thing I could hear was the sound of my own blood rushing in my ears. Michael stared at me, his eyes filled with horror, betrayal, and rage all at once. "Linda," he whispered, his voice trembling, "what is this? Explain it to me. Right now." I tried to speak, but my throat was dry. My entire body shook. I wanted to scream that it was a mistake, that the test was wrong, that somehow science had failed us. But deep down, I knew the truth. And the truth was like a blade twisting inside my chest. Michael's voice grew louder, cracking under the weight of 18 years of love and devotion. "I raised that boy. I gave him my life. And you, what did you do to me? To us?" I couldn't meet his eyes. My hands clutched the edge of the table, my knuckles white, but I couldn't find the courage to tell him everything. How could I? How could I shatter him with the full truth? So I whispered the only thing that came to my lips, a pathetic attempt to hold on to the only family I knew. "Daniel is still your son. You love him, don't you? Then why does it matter whose blood runs in his veins?" But the words sounded hollow, even to me. Michael's face twisted with pain. He staggered back as if I had stabbed him, and I knew in that moment I had lost him. That night, I sat outside Daniel's room, listening to the quiet scratching of his pen as he studied. I pressed my forehead against the wall and wept silently. How could I ever tell him? How could I look into his trusting eyes and admit that the father he adored might not be his by blood? I thought about the years we had built together, the bedtime stories, the Christmas mornings, the nights spent holding him through fevers. Was it all going to vanish because of one cruel piece of paper? Inside me, love and fear battled viciously. Love for my son, who was innocent in all of this. Fear of losing everything, my marriage, my family, the life I had fought so hard to protect. I wanted to believe that maybe, just maybe, we could bury this truth and go on as if nothing had happened. But deep down, I knew it was too late. The storm had already broken. What Michael didn't know, what no one knew, was that the DNA test wasn't just a coincidence. It wasn't just some cruel twist of fate. It was the key to a secret I had buried 18 years ago, a secret so dark that even I sometimes wished I could forget it. But the past has a way of clawing its way back to the surface. And as I sat there in the silence of that night, I realized that the nightmare was only beginning. Michael didn't speak to me for days after the results came. He walked through the house like a ghost, silent and cold, barely even looking at me. The laughter that once filled our home was gone, replaced by a suffocating tension that grew heavier with every passing hour. I wanted to beg him to forgive me, to tell him that none of this changed what we had built together, but his silence was louder than any words. And every time he looked at Daniel, I saw the hurt in his eyes deepen, as though he was seeing a stranger instead of his own son. Daniel, sweet and oblivious, carried on as if nothing had happened. He didn't know. Not yet. He would sit at the kitchen table, telling us about his excitement for university, about his dreams, about the future that seemed so bright. And while he spoke, Michael would force a smile that never reached his eyes. I sat there, caught between them, my heart tearing apart piece by piece. One night, Michael finally broke. He came into our bedroom, his face pale, his eyes red with anger and despair. He closed the door and stood there, trembling, before his voice erupted like thunder. "Whose child is he, Linda?" he demanded. 18 years. 18 years I gave you, and now I find out he isn't mine. Do you have any idea what that does to a man? I felt my chest collapse under the weight of his words. My lips trembled, but the truth burned too hot to contain any longer. I sank onto the edge of the bed, tears spilling down my face as the memory I had tried to bury clawed its way to the surface. "It wasn't supposed to happen," I whispered. "Michael, I never meant for this. I never wanted to hurt you." He leaned closer, his voice sharp. "Then tell me the truth. Who is Daniel's father?" The room spun around me as I tried to summon the courage. My hands shook violently, and my voice broke when I finally spoke the words I had been terrified to say. "It was one night. 18 years ago. Before you and I were married, when we were just struggling. We had been fighting constantly, and I was weak, and I made the biggest mistake of my life." Michael's face twisted with disgust. "Who?" I lowered my eyes, unable to look at him. The name was poison on my lips. "David." His eyes widened. He staggered back as if struck. "David? My brother?" The silence after that was deafening. Michael's breaths came in sharp, broken gasps as he tried to comprehend the betrayal. His fists clenched, his body trembling with rage. "You mean to tell me? All these years? My brother is Daniel's father?" I sobbed, burying my face in my hands. "I don't know for sure. I never saw him again. It was one night, a mistake I regretted the moment it happened. I prayed every day that Daniel was yours, and when he was born, I convinced myself he was. I convinced myself the past would never come back to haunt us." Michael's voice cracked as he shouted, "You lied to me for 18 years, Linda. 18 years. You let me raise a son who might not even be mine, while his real father walked free, living his life like nothing happened. Do you have any idea what you've done?" I reached for him, desperate, but he recoiled as if my touch burned him. His eyes were filled with hatred, and for the first time in our marriage, I knew he didn't see me as his wife anymore. He saw me as the enemy, the woman who had stolen his life from him. That night, Michael slept on the couch. I lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling, haunted by the truth that had finally escaped. The memory of David, the mistake, the shame, it all came flooding back with unbearable clarity. And now, it wasn't just my secret anymore. It was a storm that threatened to destroy us all. The next morning, Michael barely spoke. He packed a small bag, and before leaving for work, he looked at me with cold, empty eyes. "If Daniel finds out, it won't be from me. But don't think for a second I'll forgive you, Linda. This This is unforgivable. I stood frozen, tears streaming down my face as the door slammed shut. My hands trembled as I held myself, knowing I had unleashed a nightmare that I could never put back into the shadows. But the cruelest part was still to come. Because while I prayed Michael would keep the secret, I underestimated the depth of his pain. A man betrayed to the core cannot stay silent forever. And as the days passed, I began to notice the way he looked at Daniel, the way his love was turning into doubt, suspicion, and resentment. One evening, I found Michael sitting alone in the dark, staring at a glass of whiskey in his hand. His voice was low, almost broken, when he whispered, "How can I look at him and not wonder? How can I love him like I used to, when every time I see his face, I see my brother's shadow?" I wanted to scream, to beg him not to say it out loud, but before I could speak, I heard footsteps behind us. Daniel stood there in the doorway, his face pale, his eyes wide with confusion. "Dad. What are you talking about?" he asked softly. My blood ran cold. In that instant, I knew everything I had feared was about to unravel. Daniel's voice sliced through the silence like a knife. The sound of his question still hangs in my ears. "Dad. What are you talking about?" I froze, my breath caught in my throat, and Michael's hand tightened around the glass in his palm until I thought it would shatter. He didn't answer right away, his jaw clenched so tightly the veins in his neck bulged. My son, our son, stood in the doorway, his innocent eyes clouded with fear and confusion, and in that moment, I realized the truth I had been desperate to bury was about to erupt into the open. "Daniel," I whispered, my voice trembling, "go to your room. Please." But he didn't move. He stepped forward, his brows furrowed, his voice rising. "No. I heard what you said. What do you mean when you say you see Uncle David in me? What are you talking about?" Michael slammed the glass down onto the table, the sound so loud I jumped. His face twisted with anguish and rage, and before I could stop him, the words tumbled out. "You're not my son, Daniel. You never were. You belong to my brother." The air left my lungs. My body went numb as Daniel's face went pale, his lips parting in shock. He looked from Michael to me, his voice breaking. "Mom. Tell me he's lying. Tell me it's not true." I reached for him, tears already streaming down my face. "Daniel, listen to me. You are my son. You will always be my son. That's the only truth that matters." But he pulled back, his eyes narrowing as the betrayal settled in. "That's not an answer." His voice cracked, full of anger and despair. "Did you lie to me my whole life? Did you lie about Dad being my father?" I couldn't breathe. The room felt smaller, the walls closing in. Michael stood there, his chest heaving, his face a storm of hurt and bitterness, while Daniel's gaze bored into me like a blade demanding the truth. I wanted to lie, to protect him, to keep him safe from this pain, but it was too late. The secret was already bleeding out into the open. "Yes," I whispered, the word so soft I almost hoped he wouldn't hear. But he did. His entire body stiffened, his fists clenching at his sides. Daniel staggered back, shaking his head furiously. "No. No, this can't be real. You both lied to me? My entire life was a lie?" His voice broke as tears welled in his eyes. "Who am I, then? What does that make me?" I tried to move closer, but he shoved me away, his face crumpled in anguish. "Don't touch me. I don't even know who you are anymore." Watching him break like that was worse than any punishment, worse than Michael's hatred. It was my son's pain, raw, unfiltered, devastating, that shredded me from the inside out. I wanted to cradle him, to tell him that nothing had changed, that he was still the boy I carried in my arms, the child I sang to sleep, the young man I watched grow with pride. But my words were ashes now. He didn't want comfort. He wanted the truth, and the truth was poison. Michael turned away, his voice low but filled with venom. Now you know, Daniel. Now you see what she's done. She destroyed this family with her lies. Stop it. I screamed, my voice hoarse. Don't put this all on me, Michael. Yes, I made a mistake, but you didn't have to tell him like this. Not like this. He spun around, his eyes burning. He deserved to know. You wanted to bury it forever, but lies always come out, Linda. Always. Daniel's sobs echoed through the house as he bolted past us, up the stairs, and slammed his bedroom door so hard the walls rattled. The silence that followed was unbearable. I collapsed onto the couch, my body trembling, my heart shattered beyond repair. Michael stood there, fists clenched, his breathing ragged, before storming out of the house without another word. Hours passed. I sat in the dark, listening to the muffled sound of Daniel crying in his room, every sob tearing into me like a blade. I wanted to go to him, but I was paralyzed by fear that he would reject me again. That fear was worse than death. When the sun rose the next morning, the house was eerily quiet. Michael's bag was gone. He hadn't come back that night. And Daniel's room was empty. His bed was neatly made, his belongings untouched, but he was gone. My hands shook as I found the note on his desk, the words scrawled in messy handwriting, stained with tears. I can't stay here. I don't know who I am anymore. Don't look for me. The paper slipped from my fingers as I sank to the floor, a scream caught in my throat. My baby, my son, the boy I had given everything to protect, gone. And it was my fault. All of it was my fault. In that moment, I realized the truth I had been running from all these years wasn't just about who Daniel's father was. It was about the consequences of silence, the way lies grow like weeds until they strangle everything good. My family was in ruins, and the worst part was, I didn't know if I could ever bring it back together. But as I sat there in the wreckage of my home, one thought haunted me more than any other. If Daniel had gone to find answers, there was only one person he could be looking for. David. And that thought chilled me to my core. I didn't sleep that night, or the night after. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Daniel's face, his wide, broken eyes, his trembling lips as he asked me if his entire life had been a lie. I had spent 18 years protecting him from this secret, only for it to explode like a grenade on the night that should have been his proudest moment. And now, with his note still burning in my hand, I knew exactly where he had gone. He was searching for David. The thought twisted in my chest. David, Michael's brother, the man I had once trusted, the man who had stolen a moment of weakness and left me carrying a secret that haunted me every single day. I hadn't spoken to him in years. We kept our distance because the truth was too dangerous, too heavy, too toxic. But if Daniel went to him, what would David say? Would he take responsibility? Or would he twist everything, manipulate my son with his half-truths and his selfish charm the way he always had? I grabbed my phone and dialed his number, one I had sworn I would never call again. My hand shook as it rang once, twice, and then his voice answered, smooth, calm, chilling. Linda. I was wondering when you'd call. My stomach dropped. Where is he, David? Did he come to you? There was a pause, the sound of him exhaling like he was savoring the power he had over me. Yes. He's here. He showed up last night. And Linda. He looks so much like me it almost hurts. Tears burned in my eyes. Don't you dare fill his head with lies. Don't you dare make this worse. His voice hardened. The lies were yours, Linda. You kept him from me for 18 years. Do you really think he won't resent you for that? He deserves to know who his real father is. I wanted to scream, but my throat was raw. You're not his father. You're just the man who destroyed my life. But deep down, I knew those words weren't enough. Because biology didn't lie. And Daniel would see it with his own eyes. The following day, I drove for hours, my heart pounding with every mile, until I reached the small house David had always lived in. My hands trembled as I knocked, the door creaking open to reveal the last sight I wanted to see: Daniel sitting inside, his head lowered, his face pale, and David standing beside him with a hand on his shoulder. My son looked up at me, his eyes swollen from crying. "Mom," he said, his voice cold, heavy, foreign, "why didn't you ever tell me the truth?" I stepped forward, desperate, but David blocked me, his arm stretching casually like a barrier. "Easy, Linda. He deserves answers. And this time, I'll give them." Daniel pulled away from him, his expression twisted with pain. "I don't know who to believe anymore. Dad says you lied. Uncle David says you stole my life from me. And you," his voice cracked. "You just stand there, crying. Why didn't you trust me enough to know the truth?" I knelt in front of him, my hands trembling as I tried to take his. "Because I wanted to protect you. Because I was ashamed. Because every day I woke up terrified that this moment would come and I would lose you. Daniel, I swear to you, no matter what blood says, you are mine. I carried you. I raised you. I loved you every single day of your life. That's what makes you my son." For a moment, silence hung between us. I saw his lips quiver, his eyes soften, until David spoke. "Daniel, don't let her guilt control you. She kept me from you all these years. You have my face, my eyes, my blood. You deserve the truth, not excuses." The rage I had buried for 18 years erupted. I stood and faced David, my voice shaking but loud. "You don't get to do this. You don't get to walk in now, when he's broken, and play the hero. You weren't there for his first steps. You weren't there when he was sick, when he cried at night, when he graduated. You weren't there for anything. That was me. I was his mother, his father, his everything, when you were nothing but a shadow." Daniel's chest rose and fell, his tears spilling again. He pressed his hands against his face and sobbed, torn between the two of us, his heart breaking under the weight of our war. Finally, he stood, his voice sharp, cutting through the chaos. "Stop. Both of you. I don't care who carried me, who raised me, whose blood runs in my veins. I don't even know who I am anymore. I just need to breathe." And before I could stop him, he stormed past us, out of the house, into the street, leaving David and me staring at each other in silence. David smirked, his voice low. "You can't keep him from me anymore, Linda. He'll come back. He's mine." I shook my head, tears blinding me. "No. He's not yours. He'll never be yours. He's mine. And I will fight for him until my last breath." But as I watched Daniel disappear into the distance, lost and shattered, I realized something terrifying. It didn't matter what I said, or what David claimed. My son was slipping through my fingers, and I didn't know if I had the strength to pull him back. The days after Daniel walked out of that house were the longest of my life. I searched everywhere for him: his favorite park, the old library where he used to study, even the diner where he and his friends always met after school. But he was gone, unreachable, like the boy I had raised had been swallowed up by the truth that had destroyed us all. Michael barely spoke to me. His grief was silent but sharp, and every time he looked at me, I felt the weight of 18 years of lies pressing down on my chest. He was hurting, I was hurting, but nothing compared to the ache of not knowing where my son was. My hands shook when I dialed his number over and over again, praying for him to pick up, begging the universe to bring him back to me. It wasn't until the third day that he finally called. His voice was low, tired, and broken. "Mom. I don't know who I am anymore." I swallowed hard, forcing back tears. "You are Daniel. You are my son. Nothing else matters." He was quiet for a long time, then whispered, "I'm coming home. But we need to talk." When he walked through the door that evening, I almost didn't recognize him. His eyes were hollow, his shoulders slumped, like he had aged years in just a few days. He sat at the kitchen table, staring at me with a mixture of anger, sadness, and something else, resolve. "Mom," he said softly, "I went to see David again." The air left my lungs. Why? Because I had to hear it from him. I had to know the whole truth. And he told me everything. My stomach twisted. "What did he tell you?" Daniel's eyes burned into mine. "He said you weren't a victim. He said you chose him. That you betrayed Dad willingly. That you kept me from him out of spite, not love." My heart shattered. "That's not true. Daniel, listen to me." But he raised a hand, stopping me. His voice trembled, but his words cut deep. "Why should I listen now? You lied to me for 18 years. You lied to Dad. You lied to everyone. How am I supposed to trust you?" I reached across the table, desperate. "Because I am your mother. Because I carried you in my body, because I fought for you every single day. What happened with David? It was a mistake, a weakness, something I regret more than anything in my life. But my love for you has never been a lie." Daniel's lips quivered, his eyes filling with tears. "Then why didn't you ever tell me? Why did I have to find out this way? On the night I was supposed to feel proud of myself, you made me feel like my whole life was a fraud." I broke then. The walls I had built for 18 years crumbled, and I sobbed openly, begging him to understand. Because I was afraid, Daniel. Afraid that you would hate me. Afraid that you would leave me. Afraid that the truth would destroy everything we had. I thought keeping it buried would protect you, protect us. But I was wrong. I see that now. He turned away, his fists clenched. "And what about Dad? He raised me, loved me, sacrificed everything for me. How could you do that to him?" The silence that followed was unbearable. Michael stood in the doorway, his face pale, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. "That's what I've been asking myself too," he said quietly. I froze, my heart pounding. He had heard everything. Michael walked into the room, his voice steady but cold. "Daniel, I may not be your biological father, but I am the man who raised you. And nothing, no DNA test, no betrayal, can erase that. You are my son. You always will be. But you need to decide what that means for you." Daniel looked between us, torn apart, his tears streaming. "I don't know if I can forgive either of you. Not now. Maybe not ever. But I do know this, David is not my father. He never will be. Because being a father isn't about blood. It's about showing up. And he never did." For a moment, hope flickered in my chest. Then Daniel stood, his voice heavy with finality. "But Mom, you're the one who broke me. And I don't know how to come back from that." He walked past us, out the door, his footsteps echoing like a verdict I couldn't appeal. I collapsed to the floor, my sobs filling the empty kitchen, Michael's shadow cast over me. He didn't touch me. He didn't say a word. He just stood there, broken in his own silence, as the life we had built fell apart piece by piece. That night, I realized the horrifying truth wasn't the DNA test. It wasn't even the secret I had carried for 18 years. The real horror was that in trying to protect my son, I had lost him anyway. And I didn't know if I would ever get him back.